A brilliant black girl endures constant bullying from a racist teacher who unknowingly targets the principal's daughter. As tensions rise, the truth is revealed, leading to shocking consequences. Will justice be served, and can the school change for the better? Watch to find out how this gripping story unfolds. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the small southern town Florida, where Lena Davis lived with her family. The town was a close-knit community where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. But for all its warmth and charm, there were still undercurrents of division, whispers of tension that remained from an uglier time, unspoken but felt by those who had to carry its weight every day. Lena, a bright and tenacious 11-year-old, stood at the front door of her house, adjusting the straps of her backpack. Her father, Mr. Davis, stood behind her, watching with a smile. He was proud of his daughter's diligence and the way she approached her education with the same seriousness he had instilled in her since she was little. "You ready, Lena?" he asked, his deep voice filled with warmth and love. He was a tall man with a calm presence, the type of person people naturally respected. As the principal of her school, he had worked hard to earn the trust and admiration of both staff and students alike. But as her father, he worried about her like any parent would. "Yes, Daddy," Lena replied, looking up at him with a determined smile. "I'm always ready." Mr. Davis chuckled. "That's my girl. Now, you make sure to stay focused and keep being the smart, kind girl I know you are." Lena nodded. She knew her father believed in her, and that made all the difference. She had seen how hard he worked to make the school a better place, how he cared about every student who walked through those doors. She felt the same sense of responsibility to make him proud. As Lena left the house, she felt the weight of expectation on her shoulders, but not in a bad way. She enjoyed school. She enjoyed learning and being challenged. But as she walked through the front gates of the school, something deep inside her felt uneasy, like a small knot tightening in her stomach. She had heard about Ms. Harper from other students. They had whispered about how the new teacher seemed to dislike certain students, especially those who didn't look like her. Ms. Harper was a tall woman with sharp features, always impeccably dressed, her hair tightly pinned back in a severe bun. She commanded attention the moment she walked into a room, but not in a way that made people feel inspired. No, Ms. Harper demanded control. Her eyes, cold and calculating, had a way of making students shrink in their seats. She didn't yell often, but her tone was enough to cut through the air like a knife. This was Lena's first day in Ms. Harper's class, and though she was excited to learn, she couldn't shake the feeling that things might be different here. Ms. Harper had lived in the town for only a few years, having moved after her husband's career had failed in the nearby city. She had once been a woman full of hope, with dreams of a happy family, but those dreams had long since shattered. Her husband had turned to drinking, blaming his failures on everything but himself. The bars he frequented were in the black part of town, and each night he came home smelling of cheap whiskey and anger. It only fueled her hatred more. She didn't say it out loud, but Ms. Harper had come to despise black people. In her mind, they were the ones responsible for her misery. Her husband had wasted away in their neighborhoods, and though he was the one who had abandoned her emotionally, she blamed them for his ruin. It was a poisonous belief, and it had hardened her heart over the years. Now, as a teacher, Ms. Harper masked her feelings under a thin veil of professionalism. But when black students entered her classroom, her mask slipped, and her true feelings bubbled to the surface. She treated them differently, worse than the others, and she justified it in her mind as simply holding them to a higher standard, though everyone else could see it for what it was: bigotry. On this particular morning, Lena entered the classroom with the rest of her peers. She found a seat near the front, as she always did, ready to learn. Ms. Harper watched her enter from her desk, her eyes narrowing slightly. There was something about Lena that immediately rubbed her the wrong way. Perhaps it was the confidence in the girl's posture or the way she looked at Ms. Harper with bright, eager eyes. She reminded Ms. Harper of all the things she had lost: hope, potential, a future. "Class, settle down," Ms. Harper called out, standing up from her desk and walking to the front of the room. "We have a lot to cover today, and I expect your full attention." Lena kept her eyes on Ms. Harper, ready to take notes as soon as the lesson began. She could feel the tension in the room. Other students had warned her that Ms. Harper wasn't someone you wanted to get on the wrong side of. From the very first day, Ms. Harper seemed to take a special interest in Lena. But it wasn't the kind of interest a teacher takes in a promising student. No, it was something darker, something more insidious. As the class worked on their math problems, Ms. Harper hovered over Lena's desk, watching her intently. "Lena," Ms. Harper said sharply, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the classroom. "Do you even understand what we're doing?" Lena looked up, startled. She had been focused on her work, and her pencil froze mid-air. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm solving the equation like you showed us." Ms. Harper's lips curled into a thin, sarcastic smile. "Well, isn't that something? Let's see it then." Lena hesitated for only a moment before handing Ms. Harper her notebook. She had worked carefully through the problem, double-checking her answers as her father had always taught her. But as Ms. Harper looked at the page, her eyes narrowed further. "This is wrong," Ms. Harper said flatly, dropping the notebook onto Lena's desk as if it were something foul. "You're not even trying." Lena felt the weight of the accusation settle on her like a heavy blanket. She had tried. She had followed the steps exactly, but Ms. Harper wasn't interested in the truth. She was interested in making a point. I thought it was right," Lena said quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up the notebook. "I can try again." Ms. Harper straightened up, her eyes scanning the room as if to make sure everyone was watching. "No need to try again, Lena. We both know where your limits are." Lena felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't let Ms. Harper see her cry. She wouldn't give her the satisfaction. The rest of the class watched in silence. Some of the students exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke up. This was how things went in Ms. Harper's class. You kept your head down, did your work, and hoped you weren't the one she decided to single out. As the weeks went on, Lena found herself the target of Ms. Harper's increasing cruelty. The teacher would call on her in class only to criticize her answers, often making sarcastic remarks about how some people just couldn't keep up. Lena's grades began to suffer, not because she wasn't doing the work, but because Ms. Harper would mark her down for the smallest mistakes, holding her to an impossibly high standard that she didn't apply to anyone else. It didn't take long for Lena to start dreading school. She loved learning, but Ms. Harper had turned the classroom into a place of fear. Still, she didn't want to worry her father. She knew how much pressure he was under as the principal, and she didn't want to add to his burdens. So Lena kept her head down, kept trying, and hoped that one day Ms. Harper would find a new target. But Ms. Harper wasn't letting go. Each day, the teacher's comments became more pointed, more personal. One afternoon, after Lena had stayed behind to ask a question, Ms. Harper leaned down close to her desk, her voice dripping with disdain. "I don't know why you even bother, Lena," Ms. Harper whispered, just loud enough for only Lena to hear. "You and your kind never amount to anything. Maybe your family doesn't care about education, but I do. And I won't have you dragging down the rest of this class." Lena's heart raced in her chest, but she kept her eyes on her desk. Her father had always told her to stand up for herself, but in that moment, she didn't know how. The words stuck in her throat, and all she could do was nod quietly as Ms. Harper walked away, a satisfied smirk on her face. The knot in Lena's stomach tightened. She knew now that Ms. Harper wasn't just a strict teacher. She was something much worse. But Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about her. Ms. Harper's anger ran deeper than simple frustration. There was something dark inside her, something that had nothing to do with school at all. The weeks dragged on, and each day in Ms. Harper's classroom felt heavier than the last. Lena tried her best to stay focused, but no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. The tension in the air was palpable, and her classmates began to notice Ms. Harper's blatant favoritism towards certain students while constantly picking on Lena. One crisp fall morning, Lena sat at her desk, determined to ignore Ms. Harper's constant glares and focus on her work. The class was preparing for a big math test, and Lena had spent hours studying the material the night before. She knew the answers, she was confident, but the growing fear of Ms. Harper's reaction to anything she did weighed heavily on her mind. Ms. Harper circled the room like a predator, occasionally stopping behind students to check their work. When she reached Lena's desk, she paused for a moment longer than necessary, looking over Lena's paper with a cold, calculating stare. "Lena," she said, her voice icy, "I suppose you think you're ready for this test." Lena nodded slowly, keeping her eyes on her paper.